This is Pamela Nelson with the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast powered by Align, and this is episode 12. As a leader, you need to be able to receive and provide feedback in a healthy way that promotes growth. Are you ready for that, or are you terrified? Either way, listen to this week's episode and learn how to practice receiving feedback with grace and how to give feedback that's welcomed and appreciated.
Welcome to the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast, where everyone is a leader and leadership starts with you. I'm Tara.
And I'm Pamela.
Thank you for listening and inviting us along on your leadership journey.
Hi, Pamela.
Hello.
How are you today?
I am doing so good. You know what I love about doing one-to-ones with you is that we have started a regular feedback process and something that we come to the table with every time we meet now. And it makes not only the process of getting things done feel more effective, but I also feel throughout the miles, as connected as we are, even more connected, because there's no way that I can read your mind from this far away.
I actually think that we do ourselves a disservice when we assume that we can read people. So if you've listened to past episodes with us, especially around the conflict work that we did, the 2-part series on conflict, we talked about a tool called Thanos. And so Pamela and I use the Thanos framework to help us connect because we work remotely. She's in Montana. I'm in Minnesota. We meet face-to-face, meaning virtually once a week, as we collaborate and do the work that we do together. And we're trying really hard to practice what we preach, right?
Yeah, we are. And it's been really helpful. I have clients use it when I'm doing mediation with a family, whether it's a work dynamic, but mainly within marriages. And depending on the level of disconnection, the more opportunity to have a 5 or a 10-minute check-in or connection with one another builds goodwill. So that when there comes time for sharing something that's a little bit harder, which is more of a surprise during the week, there's a part of the exercise where we do own things, and that also builds a huge amount of trust. But then when those surprising things come up that feel a little bit bigger, we're still communicating, and it's not like it's a sudden communication. We're in the rhythm of it.
And this speaks to something that we want to talk about today, and that is the ability to give and receive feedback. So we talk about leadership as a practice, and it's not that we are a leader or aren't a leader. We practice leadership. And we talk about building your leadership practice, meaning what are the habits and the skills and the things that you do regularly and consistently that help make up who you are and how other people experience you as a leader. And there's an element of grounded leadership that we start with, and that's around self-awareness. And we found the most powerful exercise that we take people through when we're working on self-awareness is the ability to proactively seek feedback.
Yes.
And one of the reasons we do that, obviously, is to build self-awareness. So as leaders, we have to give feedback and coach people. We can only be better at that when we are on the other side and experience receiving feedback.
Yes. And the word curiosity here is so important because it's not just about curious of the feedback that's coming to me, but it's also really being curious about what's happening in me as I'm receiving this feedback. And if I come at it from an athletic coaching side of things, and we've used this example a couple times, we hire that coach to be able to say that stroke in swimming is off. You need to be doing this. And someone is watching us because we can't watch ourselves. And we want them to help us get better. Tiger Woods, whole series of coaches that's helping him with his swing and lots of money to be able to say, I want to make this go faster and be more efficient. And yet, when it comes to things that we do within the workplace, we oftentimes rise up defensively or offensively, depending on how we receive or don't receive feedback. So today's conversation is really important.
Yeah, because we have to be able to, as leaders, deliver feedback, or we aren't going to help the people that we lead to grow.
Yeah.
Or we won't be able to meet the goals that we're working towards. So that constant feedback loop is really important because we need to know that we're all aligned, that we're all on the same page, that we're all moving in the same direction. And so when someone's veering a little off course, you need to be able to give them feedback so that they can come back and move together with the team. You also need to give feedback when they're getting in their own way. We see this happen a lot with leaders. Maybe we're meeting with someone and they're frustrated and maybe venting or complaining about someone that they lead and a frustrating behavior. And potentially they've never had a hard conversation. They've never had a challenging conversation to help that person understand that they're getting in their own way. So, as a leader, we owe it to the people we lead to be able to give effective feedback. And like I said, the best way to learn that and to get better at that is to practice receiving feedback, because when you are on the other side of it, you get to connect with the emotions and
Yeah.
that defensiveness and those pieces. And often the leaders we work with are owners, small business owners. No one's giving you feedback. Leadership is lonely for a reason. And one of them is no one's actively worried about your own development, right?
Yes.
We have the opportunity to help each other grow. And
Yeah.
that is a gift. If you work alone, maybe you have another business friend, maybe you have someone that you can connect with intention. But if you work with other people, you have people who are there who can help you. And all you need to do is ask. Now, this requires vulnerability. So, in the aware section of grounded leadership, we do an exercise that requires feedback. And it's interesting because we get people ready. There's a TED talk we have them watch. We do some work together to really prepare them for how to listen to feedback. And then the feedback questions themselves are very simple and they don't invite harsh critique. They invite what we call loving critique. And Dr. Tasha Urich talks about finding loving critics. So you can have people in your life who are unloving critics. So those are people who are happy to tell you what they think, but they don't really care about you, right? You don't
Yes.
really get the sense that they care.
Yes.
You can have uncritical lovers who will tell you whatever they think you want to hear because they just want you to feel good in the moment, but they don't really care about your growth
Yeah.
more than they care about their own discomfort. And then you have some people in your life who are truly loving critics. They're people who are willing to tell you the truth because they care about you. They will not leave you stuck in whatever it is where you're stuck. So, as you're listening, I just want you to take a minute and think about who are the loving critics in your life. And if you're a leader, you're less likely to have them at work. And you might need to develop some, meaning you might need to create the opportunity and space for people to give you feedback more often. And then proactively asking for feedback. You send an email to people and say, I'm working on growing my own awareness. And I would love to get some feedback from you to improve the way that I lead or to improve our working relationship. What's one thing I do that brings value? What's one thing I could change or improve that would help our working relationship? That's it. Now, you do not allow them to respond over email, but you meet in person and you ask the questions and you allow them to tell you and you just listen. This is not an opportunity for you to defend or excuse or explain. The only thing you can say is tell me more
Which is a powerful statement.
and thank you.
Yeah.
And it does a few things, right? So, one, we just hopefully learn some things about ourselves that aren't just critical, but also good.
Yeah.
So I think we've learned when we're doing this with groups of people, they're really nervous about what they're going to hear. And they never think about the good they're going to hear.
Mm.
They're self protecting about the bad or the negative or the mistakes or failures they're going to hear about.
Yeah. And Tara, we're recording this and I can see you on Zoom. And when you said I'm pre self protecting, what you did is you raised your shoulders and you clung to yourself like I'm bracing for what is happening. And whether you're in that posture or not, oftentimes our brain goes into a period of bracing. And so it's the story we tell ourselves in our head of how I am going to, again, protect myself about what I'm going to hear. But the power of pre talking about how we will feel braced because we haven't practiced yet getting this regular feedback. And the more that we do this, the more that it becomes a natural part of our leadership as a practice, the less we're going to have to really work on not bracing, not getting in our fight or flight, not already pre coming defensive, and really coming with our hands open so that we can also receive that good feedback, which as we've worked with teams, and I know this work that I've done within myself, it becomes very difficult to actually believe what people are telling you, if there's a place that you can't trust that they're giving you something that is actually true. And then that is your work to do. Why is it that you don't trust them? Why is your voice the truly trusted voice in your head? Are you
Mm.
able to actually tell yourself the truth around what you're seeing in the mirror, around the value of what you bring to the table? And I will beg to say that we often do not. We do not know our true value, and we need to receive as much goodness as anything else.
So part of the exercise that we ask is for people to bring 4 adjectives that they would use to describe you or describe me to someone that doesn't know us. And those words can speak life over us.
Yeah.
And so once you've received feedback from a few people, you can look for the patterns. And are more than one person saying that you're kind and generous, then you probably are a kind and generous person, and they are finding your leadership to be kind and generous. It's interesting in the work that we've done, I would say that people had almost as hard a time hearing the positive
Yes.
as they do about the hard or negative, and very few surprises in the critique or the opportunity. Almost always people are saying, I did know that was something I needed to work on. I just haven't prioritized it, and now I will. It's interesting. They were more surprised with the positive than they were with the negative because we are bracing.
And we pre disqualify ourselves. That's not really true because we are in a spirit of comparison with whoever in our head is the best that's ever
Mhm.
happened in the entire world. And so it's why we disqualify ourselves from leadership or from writing that book that we're supposed to write, from meeting that person that we should be meeting. It's because we think other people do it better. The thing is that we need you. We need your voice. Whoever that other person is, isn't in your sphere of influence. And you are meant to influence the people with the gifts that you have, the strengths you have. And you have to hear it to continue it and not pre disqualify yourself right out of it.
We do have this perfectionistic tendency when it comes to receiving positive feedback that if I know I've made any mistakes in that area, or if I know I struggle or stumble in that area, that disqualifies you from saying that I'm good at that.
Yeah.
There are things that I'm working on that other people would say I'm good at that I know I have to work hard at. And so I disqualify that as a skill or an ability, which is so ironic because you are being intentional, right? We're being intentional and working on those things. So if you're hearing the feedback that it's showing up the way you intend it to,
Yes.
take it as a win.
Absolutely. And in the space of being coaches, then we also have to get out of our head and leaders out of our head that if it is something that I have not mastered myself,
Mhm.
someone else is challenged with it across the screen from me or across the room from me, I can still speak to it for you. And however, in our head, we may not feel we can bring it up because we haven't also mastered it.
What's really interesting is that when someone gives us a compliment, or positive praise or appreciation and we discount it, we discount them and we
Yeah.
discount what's important to them.
Yeah.
So think about this the next time someone gives you unsolicited or solicited positive feedback. That if you don't take time to understand why was that important to them? They said I was generous. What about me has them thinking that I'm generous? And then they share some examples that you would have never thought of. And you didn't know that was, you've just lost the opportunity to learn something about the people you work with when we don't pause to learn more about the positive as well as the negative, right?
Yeah, and this is the power of the affirmation tool in the Thanos exercise as well, because that's where that positive feedback comes. And it's really about catching someone doing something good in a
Mhm.
little way. It's about surprising them with the smallest of things that makes the biggest difference. So, Tara, how do we help people prepare to receive feedback? So, there's two parts of preparation. One is to give it, which that can also feel challenging and rise things up within us. And then there's also the preparation to receive it. Let's walk through some tools that we can give people in the receiving of it.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear your perspective too on this, Pamela. I think one of the tools is just to spend some time reflecting on what your fears are. What are the things you are afraid you might hear?
Yeah.
And you know what? That is feedback in and of itself for you.
Totally. Naming those fears and probably the story that goes with it, and even thinking of getting feedback can bring forth a former small t or big T trauma of even in the workplace of someone not being healthy with you and their leadership. And I'm really sorry that has happened. And it's happened to more people than you can imagine. But stuffing that down as not being meaningful is not helpful. And so once we have named it, spoken even to ourselves, or journaled, or written down, or shared with another person what happened, then we have the opportunity to move forward into this chapter of our life. When we name it, yeah, I made a mistake, but I'm not a mistake. And if I think I'm a mistake, I'm mistaken. I need to recognize that I get to grow. And so in this place, I name that really hard situation and I release myself from it, from things that I did in my younger self. And I, with gratitude, say thank you that today I get the opportunity to grow. Today I get to have someone observe both the good and where the challenges are. And I speak to my body. Where is that anxiousness, that fear showing up in my body? And I can just say, thank you, mind, body, soul, and spirit, that you are ready to receive both the positive and something that you will have the opportunity to work on. You will go further faster because someone was vulnerable and kind, compassionate, and clear enough to share with you ways that you can grow.
So you brought up another piece that I would say is an important tool, which is to remind yourself of the purpose of asking for feedback,
Yeah.
because we can quickly forget that the purpose is to grow,
Yeah.
that our purpose is to grow. When we start to feel defensive, our mind can shift to say we need to prove ourselves right, or we need to protect this relationship.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried about my reaction. And so I'm going to pull back from giving or receiving feedback because I'm worried that it might damage the relationship, when actually the not connecting and the not listening and the not really seeing, hearing, and valuing what someone else has to say does more damage to the relationship.
Completely. And when you're then receiving it in that purpose to grow, another thing to be very aware of is your non spoken cues. How is my head, my body, and my agreement of what's coming to me allowing for the person who's giving it to me to know that I'm open,
Mhm.
rather than sitting back with my arms crossed and looking like I'm shooting fiery darts from my eyes? But if you do feel emotions rise up in you, again, name it. I'm getting emotional right now, but I want you to know this isn't you. You may name it and be able to stay in the situation. You may need to take 10 minutes to go get a drink of water, to go walk around a little bit, and to say to the person, I am so thankful for what you just shared, but I just need a minute. It's about me and how I'm learning to regulate. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to come back in 10 minutes. And that's okay because you're a beginner, because you're practicing. And this doesn't mean you're less than, not capable, being childish. Emotions come when they come. The worst thing we can do is stuff it down because we'll explode later or we'll beat ourselves up later. The most mature thing that you can do in your emotions is to actually name it and then to say what you need and then to go back into the conversation.
It's so important. It really is a practice of emotional regulation, being able to regulate your emotions. So if you are someone who hasn't had a lot of practice or haven't had a lot of discipline and maturity around how you regulate your emotions with others, then this practice might be a really great way to learn. And you might want to practice on people who you really do have high trust with first,
Yeah.
who will understand, so that you can get some practice of hearing maybe some things that are a little uncomfortable and know that you can respond with grace and maturity instead of reacting, right? So
Yeah.
nothing is worse for an employee or a colleague than to be asked for feedback, to give it, and then get a really defensive, difficult response.
Yeah.
And the second worst thing would be to ask for feedback and then nothing changes. So only do this exercise if you're a leader who's interested in growing. And it is a practice to build. We do this exercise as part of the learning journey that we have, but the purpose isn't to do it once. The purpose is to flex that muscle and then you'll flex it again. So continually asking for that feedback on a regular basis, to check in and to hold yourself accountable to your own leadership and your own goals. There's the asking and proactively receiving feedback. And then there's the giving of feedback. We equally avoid this.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, it really is a disservice to the people that are with us because they have an opportunity to learn and grow, and you have information that can help them.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have this conversation with someone I don't have a trusted relationship with. But if I believe that my coach or my manager, my leader is for me, then I come in a lot less defensive. It isn't about even that word critique. It's about being generous with helping someone see where they might have a blind spot. And it's called blind spots for a reason. Now, if I'm noticing someone really get activated, I do want to give permission for people to say, I'm not sure that you just heard what I said.
Yes.
Can you state back to me what it is you heard me say? If we're in our fight or flight brain and someone says one trigger word, it can bring an old story forward into a new meeting. So I want to make sure that I am very aware and attuned to the emotional cues that someone's giving me across the table and then have permission to ask that question.
That's so important because you can usually tell when someone has gone from listening and engaged in the conversation to defensive or emotional or now telling themselves a much bigger story than even you intend. Maybe you're having a coaching conversation with someone you work with because you need to change a process that isn't working. And you're giving feedback about the process, and someone assumes that they've made a mistake. And we're talking about this process isn't working, and someone is getting frustrated and defensive because they aren't feeling valued.
Yeah.
And so, if you can just pause to say, what are you hearing? And if you've built some trust, if they can tell you, I feel like my part in this process isn't valued, there's a lot of work here that goes into it. Yes, I value that. And we need to change the process so that we all get the value, right? This
Mm.
isn't to do with your value, it's to do with the process. Something that is very helpful when you're giving feedback, critical feedback, is to start with what you know that is true and kind about the person.
Yeah.
Pamela, I know you care a lot about people. And so when you do X, it's confusing because it causes this kind of impact with people, but I know that's not your intent.
Yeah.
Can we talk about what's going on there? Can we explore what's happening and then collaborate on a solution? It really puts you on the same side of the table as the person you're working with, as opposed to being us versus them.
Yeah. And it allows me to hear what you're saying and to understand that you're being curious. And then it allows me to be curious. What is it about the fact that I care a lot about people to then have me then feel like I have to carry all the people? And that's a lot like codependency. We're just doing a scenario here. And another thing that might come up in a workplace is someone doesn't feel able to truly give you things that are constructive. They only tell you what they feel like you want to hear. And that's not helpful for you. Your intent is to try to probably please them and to try to be helpful.
Mhm.
However, what ends up happening is that the leader who's not seeing a deliverable or who says, why didn't you tell me that? Or I wish I would have known that, then loses trust in you as a person. And you could come at that conversation and just say, I recognize that you want to be helpful and feel like a team player. But part of what I don't get from you, I feel, is your real honest feedback about how this is going to impact you. And I want to give you permission to collaborate honestly and truthfully, being able to say yes to things and give feedback truthfully.
And then after delivering feedback like that or having that kind of a conversation with someone, especially if you're leading that person, be willing to come back and coach around it ongoing. Don't expect instant behavior change. Those are ingrained habits.
Yeah.
Those are things that have happened over time, either because of that person's experience in the past, may have nothing to do with you as a leader, or because maybe you used to be a highly reactive person as a leader and now you've made some changes. I'd love for the people to come along and assume the best of you, but it takes time.
Yeah.
I could envision a week later being able to say, I can see you're frustrated. And I'm curious why we couldn't have had a conversation about that up front. Now, sometimes it might be that they just didn't think about it ahead of time. But the more you can bring the conversation back to that point of grounded conversation you had in the beginning, they're going to start to trust that this isn't a one and done conversation. You're paying attention now, and you are hoping for and expecting them to bring their voice. And so there's an ongoing opportunity to coach there.
Yeah. So, Tara, as we end this podcast here today on giving and receiving feedback, I'd love to do just a quick example of how to do a workplace Thanos conversation. It could be as short as 5 minutes. Some people do it where one person says the whole exercise and the other person does it. For our purposes today, I'd love to just do the ping pong where we each get a chance.
All right. So F is for feeling. So what am I feeling? I am feeling connected. We've just had the opportunity to record a few podcasts and feeling really good about the work that we're doing together and feeling really grateful that even though we live many states away, that we have this opportunity.
And I'm going to say delighted in regards to the podcast itself, because we only began just a few short months ago. And I think back to sitting around your table in January, really dreaming of where it could go. And we just had our second guest, and the conversation flows because of the spaces that we get invited into. So it
Mhm.
feels really natural in the rhythm of how the conversation goes. We don't have to guess.
Agreed. A is for appreciate. So I appreciate so many things about you, Pamela, but I appreciate that you have taken on the editing of the podcast because it is no small task, people. And it's a big lift for both of us, but Pamela, for you, that's a big technical lift of taking that on. And so I'm really grateful that you care enough to make sure that we sound like we know what we're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that you connect with other people on behalf of people. So, on behalf of myself, whether it's for working with you or just someone individually, the word of mouth referral, which is what originally connected us, is what you are a master at. And so, you're a lead generator. And right now, I have a lot of other ways that I'm caring for people. And taking that off my plate is a huge gift to me. So, thank you.
I love sending people your way. I know that they'll be well cared for. N is for need. So this can be either something I need from you or need to know or remember about me. I think just in general, I have a need to slow down our pace a bit. We've been in content creation heavy for the last couple of months, and I'm going to combine N and O, which is also owning that I'm the one who set that pace. So it's my fault. Right? So I need to slow it down. I'm working to actively slow it down. And I need you to know that I'm working on that. And I own the impact that's had on us both. So thank you for your patience with that.
Yeah. We hold both spaces, the friend space and the workspace. And so for me, we lost one of our weekly rhythms and I miss it. Our evening Tuesday night slash Wednesday night rhythm. And we need to find something else to
I
do
hear
around that. I'm like, I really miss like enjoying a random, funny, goofy thing with you. And so I love that element of my Enneagram 7 friend who is a lot of fun. And then I own the fact that I tend to ignore the Trello notifications.
you.
It's not helpful. And it is a ticking off box thing, but it's another thing that I just haven't gotten in the rhythm of doing after hours. I own that I will strategically put that on my to do.
Thank you. And then S is for either like an update on a known struggle, something that you're working on, or a success that you've had. And I'll just say a success was we started working with someone who was a listener of the podcast, and that's a success. And more so, just that we've been able to communicate with all of you listeners in a way that's meaningful. We're so grateful for all of you who choose to tune in and hopefully are finding high value. And so this was a dream that we had and we're off and running. And so I'll count that as a success.
So for me, a success is the larger group space where we have seen the impact of the whole person makes such a big difference in the workplace. I love being brought into that space, and success is doing it with you.
we get the opportunity to do work that we really care deeply about and that we know makes an impact on people's lives. Yeah. So hopefully you've enjoyed our conversation about feedback today, both receiving and giving of feedback. If you have questions or need help with that, please reach out. We would be happy to converse with you and provide tools. We'll have a few of the tools that we referred to today in the show notes. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Also, really quickly, one more note. If you are enjoying the podcast, if this is not just your first podcast episode and you've decided to listen to more than one, we assume that you're finding value. Would you do us a huge favor? Rate us on whatever platform you're listening to. Give us a rating, leave us a review. We would love to hear what you're enjoying about the podcast, and it would really help us find even more new listeners. Thank you.
Come on.